the reason that we're doing there is that there's two iconic bits. In fact, there's three things, and I always forget one of them. There's three things that I really want to see around this area. First is the Lloyd's building. Who's heard of the Lloyd's Insurance building? It's a Norman Foster designed building that was built in the 1980s, and it's a real iconic building. It's one of the first buildings where they actually put all of the services, all of the ductwork and everything outside the building. Very spectacular. This building is one you'll want to see. This is Swiss Ray building, which most people know is called the Gherkin. So we'll get to see that. You can't go in either of these buildings because of security issues, but at least we can get to go by them. And the other building that I want us to go through is there is a market here which was refurbished about 20 or 30 years ago, which is, forget the name of it, but it's a really nice old style Victorian market that will probably go down. We'll then sort of walk through the city. This is the Royal Exchange and the Bank of England. If any of you ever seen the movie Mary Poppins, this is the Royal Exchange. The seats of the Royal Exchange is where the ladies selling food for the pigeons is sat on. But these are sort of all iconic London buildings. We'll walk down what's called Cheapside, and we'll get to the back of St Paul's Cathedral, and then we'll wander around that. That's something that on the free day that you have in London you'll probably want to come back to and visit. But we'll spend some time wandering around there, and then we'll head up towards the Barbican, which is where we'll finish our walk. The Barbican was, I guess, until the Swiss Ray and the Lloyd's building, actually it is probably the last major large urban development in London. I mean, real large project. And that's another of the projects that you have a construction history booklet of. That project went on for a very long period of time, was plagued with industrial action and strikes and stuff. What we'll do then is we'll get the tube back to our hotel and you'll have the rest of the day up. If you can zoom out, Simon. One of the things that's going to be key to understanding the city, and it's one of the things you just don't get when you go there, because you see the city in its 2013 version. You've never seen the city of what it was like when it was in the 1950s and 60s, like I have. I grew up seeing London in the 1960s, and when you drove through London, it was what it was, a bomb site, because it still hadn't been rebuilt from the Second World War. So one of the things that I've included in the map that you've got is you've got one of the London County Council bomb survey maps. This area up here is pretty much the Barbican. This is this. So what you'll see when you go to the Barbican is a whole load of 1970s and 1980s redevelopment. Purple on a London County Council bomb map means the buildings were destroyed to an extent that they could not be repaired. So if you think about it, this is St Paul's Cathedral. There is a huge swathe of the City of London to the north and east of St Paul's Cathedral that was totally destroyed by aerial bombing during the Second World War. So bear that in mind when you go visit. When you start seeing the types of buildings you get around here, remember none of that was there at the end of the Second World War. It all gone. It was flat, completely destroyed. And if you get some time, try and Google some aerial pictures of the area around St Paul's Cathedral in London. There's a lot of them that are on the websites. just to see the level of destruction there, because I think you'll get a greater appreciation of what it looks like. Because the area that we're going to in Bloomsbury, that we're going to be staying in, is pretty much intact, isn't it? It's all sort of Georgian terraced housing, and it's really, really neat. I mean, it looks old, and it is old because it wasn't damaged as much as this area of the city was. I've also put on the handout that you've got a map of the City of London around the time when St Paul's Cathedral was built. There it is. This is the area called the Strand, which is still there. There's still a road called the Strand. This is the approach to what was called Westminster Ford. So I think this is where the Houses of Parliament are now. This is Trafalgar Square, and Buckingham Palace is in here, St James's Park. Pretty much nothing to the west of the city, some stuff to the north, but most of this down here are gardens. So it gives you an idea of where the city grew out of. You'll see, and I'll point out to you when we go on the visit, there's a very clear distinction when you get into the city. There's you'll see the emblem of the City of London, which is a griffin. Any point where you go into the city is usually called something gate, like Bishopsgate, Eastgate, Cheapside Gate. There's a whole load of different gates, and they're marked, so you clearly know when you're going into the City of London, which is the old historic part of the centre. Okay, so any questions about stuff to do in London before we sort of go on to the country walk?
About how far is that walk?
We'll probably do a good 8 miles, like 10 miles. But you guys will be used to it, I mean, you'll be hardened. But it's not, you're not marching. We stop, we'll be stopping it's a real, is it? So I mean, it's a real leisurely pace, because you'll